The afternoon sun bore down on Maple Street with an indifference that matched the passing cars. It was the kind of late summer day where heat shimmered off the asphalt, where children should have been laughing at the playground across the street, where life should have moved at its ordinary, unremarkable pace. But there was nothing ordinary about what was happening outside Morrison's corner store. Shanice Williams was 17 years old. She wore her hair in neat braids her grandmother had done that morning, the pink beads at the ends clicking softly when she moved. Her backpack, decorated with pins from the debate team and a fading Black Lives Matter button, lay on the ground several feet away, its contents scattered across the sidewalk. A spiral notebook, colored pens, a worn copy of The Bluest Eye for English Class. And Shanice herself was pressed face down against the hot concrete, her cheek grinding into the grit and dust, while Officer Derek Halloway's knee drove into her back, with enough force to make breathing an act of will. "I didn't do anything!" Her voice cracked with desperation and pain. "Please, I can't breathe!" Officer Halloway's face was flushed red, whether from exertion or anger no one could tell. His hand gripped the back of Shanice's neck, pressing her down harder. "Stop resisting!" But she wasn't resisting. Anyone with eyes could see she wasn't resisting. Her thin arms were twisted behind her back, her wrists already bearing the red marks where the plastic zip ties cut into her skin. She was crying now, not the loud sobs of a child, but the desperate, choking tears of someone who understood that the world had decided something about her that had nothing to do with who she actually was. What did she do? The question came from Marcus, Shanice's younger brother. He was 14, all gangly limbs and uncertainty, but his voice carried the weight of every terrifying story their mother had ever told them about how to behave around police. Keep your hands visible, don't talk back. Comply, 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 even when you've done nothing wrong, especially when you've done nothing wrong. "Step back," Officer Halloway barked, not looking up. The radio on his shoulder crackled with static and indecipherable voices. "She's my sister," Marcus pleaded, his voice breaking. "She just came out of the store. She bought gum, that's all, just gum. The receipt's in her pocket. Please, you're hurting her." Next to Marcus stood Shanice's friend, Destiny, her phone clutched in trembling hands. She'd been recording since the moment Officer Halloway had grabbed Shanice's arm and accused her of stealing. The video showed everything. Shanice's confusion, her attempts to show the receipt, the officer's immediate escalation, his hands on her, pushing her, forcing her down. "Please stop," Destiny begged, tears streaming down her face. "She didn't do anything wrong. We were just—" "I said step back. Both of you." Officer Halloway's free hand moved to his belt, not quite touching his weapon, but close enough that the threat was unmistakable. The children stepped back. What else could they do? They were taught that police officers were supposed to protect them, but here was protection that looked like violence. Here was the law that felt like injustice. Inside Morrison's corner store, old Mr. Morrison watched through the window, his weathered hands gripping the counter. He'd seen Shanice buy a pack of gum not 10 minutes ago, had counted out her dollar and given her the change, had even complimented her on the book she was carrying. She was a good kid, one of the ones who said please and thank you, who held the door for elderly customers, who sometimes came in to buy milk for her grandmother and always made sure to get the right brand. But he didn't come outside. He didn't say a word. Later, he would tell himself that he'd been afraid, that things had escalated too quickly, that he was just an old man who couldn't possibly have made a difference. Later, that silence would sit in his chest like a stone. On Maple Street, a small crowd was beginning to gather. Mrs. Chen, who ran the nail salon 2 doors down, stood on the sidewalk with one hand over her mouth. A young couple out for a walk had stopped, their hands clasped together. A man in a delivery uniform paused mid-stride, packages still clutched to his chest. They all watched, they all saw, and for a long, terrible moment, they all did nothing. Because what do you do when authority itself becomes the threat? When the badge meant to symbolize protection becomes the weapon? When speaking up might mean becoming the next person on the ground, gasping for air, crying out that you didn't do anything wrong? "Officer, excuse me." The voice was tentative, belonging to Sarah Winters, a young white woman who'd been passing by. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I saw her come out of the store with—" "Ma'am," This doesn't concern you." Officer Halloway didn't even look at her, but Sarah took a step closer. "I'm just saying, I saw what happened. She came out of the store eating gum. She paid for it. Are you interfering with police business?" Now he looked at her, and there was something dangerous in that look. Sarah faltered. She glanced at Shanice, at this girl who might have been her own daughter, her niece, her student. She saw the way Shanice's body had gone still, except for the trembling. Not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of prey, trying not to be noticed, trying not to give any excuse for the violence to escalate. "No, I just—" Sarah's voice trailed off. She stepped back, her courage crumbling under the officer's glare. "I'm sorry." Shanice made a sound then, something between a sob and a gasp. It was the sound of hope dying, of one more person choosing silence over solidarity. Marcus couldn't take it anymore. "She's not a criminal," he shouted, his voice cracking with puberty and panic. "Why are you doing this? She's 17, she bought gum. Why won't anyone help her?" His words hung in the air like an accusation, because that's what they were. An accusation against every person standing there, every witness who had convinced themselves that their silence was wisdom, that their inaction was prudence. It was Mr. Rivera who broke first. He'd been standing near his flower shop, watching with his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He was a father of 3 daughters. He'd marched in the 90s when Rodney King's beating had been broadcasted on every television screen. He'd sworn then that he would never be a bystander, and yet here he stood, a bystander. No more. "That's enough," Mr. Rivera's voice boomed across the street as he stepped forward. He was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of hauling bags of soil and lifting flower pots, and his presence had weight. "Officer, I'm a witness. That young woman came out of the store with gum she purchased. I saw the whole thing. You need to let her up. Now." Officer Halloway's head snapped toward him. "Sir, I will not tell you again to—" "No." Mr. Rivera planted his feet. "I won't step back. That child is hurt. She's scared, and she's innocent. Whatever you think happened, whatever call you got, you have the wrong person." Something shifted in the air. It was subtle but unmistakable, like the moment before a storm breaks, when the pressure changes and the sky darkens. Mrs. Chen took a step forward, then another. "He's right," she said, her accent thick with emotion but her words clear. "I saw too. She paid. She's just a girl." The young couple moved closer, their fingers still intertwined. "This isn't right," the woman said softly, but in the heavy silence, her words carried. The delivery man set down his packages. "I'm recording too," he announced, holding up his phone. "From the beginning." One by one they came. The bystanders became witnesses. The silent became voices. They formed a loose circle around the officer and the girl on the ground, not threatening, not violent, but present. Undeniably, unmistakably present. Sarah Winters, the woman who had apologized and stepped back, felt something break loose in her chest. Shame. Courage. Perhaps both. She moved forward again. "I'm sorry," she said, but this time not to the officer. "I'm sorry," she said to Shanice, to Marcus, to every moment in her life when she'd looked away because looking was uncomfortable. "Officer, you need to let her up. We're all witnessing this. We're all watching. And we're all seeing that she didn't do anything wrong." Officer Halloway's face had gone from red to pale. His eyes darted from person to person, counting them, calculating. The knee pressing into Shanice's back eased slightly, but he didn't remove it. Not yet. "This girl matches the description of a shoplifter from—" "What description?" Mr. Rivera challenged. "Young? Black? That's not a description, officer, that's a profile. That's prejudice wearing a badge." The words landed like a slap. Officer Halloway's jaw tightened. "I'm doing my job." "Your job is to protect and serve," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "But who are you protecting right now? Who are you serving?" Destiny, still recording, found her voice again. It shook, but it held. "His job isn't to hurt kids who didn't do anything wrong. His job isn't to assume someone's guilty just because of the color of their skin." Marcus wiped his tears with the back of his hand. He looked at all these people, strangers really, just people who happened to be on Maple Street at the wrong time, or maybe the right time, and felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. They saw his sister, they saw her humanity, they refused to look away. "Please," he said, his voice steadier now. "Please, let my sister go." Officer Holloway's radio crackled again. A voice on the other end was asking for a status update. His hand hovered over the device, then fell away. He looked at Shanice, really looked at her, and perhaps for the first time saw what everyone else saw. A terrified teenager, small and hurt and innocent, or perhaps he simply saw that he was outnumbered not by force, but by conscience. Slowly, he eased his weight off her back. Slowly, he cut the zip ties binding her wrists. Shanice gasped and curled into herself, her shoulders heaving with sobs. Marcus broke through the circle and dropped to his knees beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're okay. I've got you." Destiny was there a moment later, kneeling on Shanice's other side, still recording, still bearing witness. Officer Holloway stood up, brushing dust from his knees. He didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge the error, the violence, the casual brutality of assuming guilt based on nothing more than the color of a girl's skin. He simply muttered something about responding to a call and better safe than sorry, and retreated to his patrol car. The crowd watched him go, silent now, not from fear or uncertainty, but from a shared understanding of what they'd just witnessed and what they'd just done. Mr. Morrison finally emerged from his store, the receipt clutched in his shaking hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "God forgive me. I'm sorry. I should have said something right away." Mr. Rivera put a hand on the old man's shoulder. "You can say something now. You can be a witness now." Shanice was sitting up now, her breathing still ragged but steadier. Her wrists bore the marks of the zip ties, her cheek was scraped and dirty, and her eyes were swollen from crying. But she was free. She was surrounded by people who had chosen, finally, to see her as more than a stereotype, more than a profile, more than the prejudice that tried to define her by the melanin in her skin. "Thank you," Marcus said to the crowd, his voice breaking again. "Thank you for seeing her. Thank you for speaking up." Mrs. Chen crouched down, her own eyes wet with tears. "Miha, are you hurt? Do you need doctor?" Shanice shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know anything anymore." Sarah Winters knelt beside them. "My sister is a lawyer, a civil rights lawyer. Can I call her for you? You shouldn't have to go through this alone." "We need the videos," Mr. Rivera said. "Everyone who recorded, we need those videos. This needs to be documented. This needs to matter." The delivery man was already pulling up email addresses, syncing files. "I'll make sure they're backed up in 3 places. This won't disappear." Destiny held up her phone. "I've got every second of it, from the moment he grabbed her." As they helped Shanice to her feet, as they gathered her scattered belongings and brushed the dirt from her clothes, as they exchanged phone numbers and promises to be witnesses if she needed them, something fundamental had changed on Maple Street. They had seen a girl reduced to a stereotype. They had watched authority become oppression. They had felt the pull of silence, the safety of looking away, the comfort of not getting involved. And they had chosen differently, not quickly enough, not easily. But in the end, they had chosen to see Shanice Williams as a human being, not a threat, not a profile, not a suspect, but a 17-year-old girl with braids and pink beads and a book in her backpack, who liked gum and debate team, and had done absolutely nothing wrong except exist in her own skin in a world that had decided her skin was cause for suspicion. That evening, Shanice sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, an ice pack pressed to her cheek. The local news was already picking up the story. The videos were spreading online. The police department had issued a statement about reviewing the incident and investigating the matter thoroughly. Her grandmother sat across from her, holding her hand. "Baby," she said softly, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry this is the world we live in." Shanice squeezed her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, I was so scared. I thought no one was going to help. I thought they were all just going to watch him hurt me and do nothing." "But they didn't do nothing," Marcus said from the doorway. "They spoke up. They stood with you." "Eventually," Shanice whispered. "But for a while, for what felt like forever, they just watched." Her grandmother nodded slowly. "That's the truth of it, baby. That's the hard truth. Good people, regular people, they freeze. They're scared. They're uncertain. They've been taught their whole lives not to challenge authority, not to make waves. But here's what matters. They found their courage. They found it for you." "But why did they have to find it?" Shanice's voice rose with frustration and hurt. "Why wasn't I worth protecting from the start? Why did they have to work up to seeing me as human?" There was no good answer to that question. There never is. Marcus came and sat beside his sister, bumping his shoulder against hers the way he'd done since they were little. "You know what Mr. Rivera said to me before we left? He said, 'I'll never be silent again, I promise you that. I'll never just watch again.' And Mrs. Chen gave me her number," Destiny added, coming into the kitchen with cups of tea. "She said if I ever need anything, ever, she'll be there. She said she's ashamed it took her so long to speak up." Shanice wiped her eyes. "I don't want their shame. I don't want their guilt. I just want—" Her voice cracked. "I just want to go to the store and buy gum without wondering if someone's going to assume I'm stealing. I just want to walk down the street without wondering if my skin is going to make someone see a criminal instead of a person." Her grandmother squeezed her hand tighter. "I know, baby, I know." "It's not fair," Shanice whispered. "No," her grandmother agreed. "It's not. It's not fair, and it's not right, and it shouldn't be this way. But those people today, they saw that. They saw the injustice, they saw the prejudice, and they did something about it. That matters. It doesn't fix everything, but it matters." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Shanice the messages already flooding in. People they knew, people they didn't, all saying they stood with her, all saying they'd speak up next time, sooner, louder, all saying they saw what happened and they knew it was wrong. "It's going viral," he said quietly. "People are angry, people are demanding that officer be held accountable." Shanice looked at the messages, at the comments, at the shares and retweets and hashtags. Justice for Shanice was already trending. Strangers were dissecting every frame of the video, noting every detail, the receipt clutched in her hand, the way she complied with every command, the disproportionate force, the lack of any evidence of wrongdoing. But she also saw the other comments, the ones saying she must have done something to provoke it, the ones questioning why she was really stopped, the ones insisting that if she'd just followed orders, she would have been fine, ignoring the fact that she had followed every order and had still ended up face down on the pavement with a knee in her back. "They still don't see," she said softly. "Some of them will never see." "You're right," her grandmother said. "Some of them won't. They'll make excuses. They'll invent reasons. They'll bend themselves into pretzels trying to justify what happened because facing the truth, facing the racism, the prejudice, the casual cruelty of assumptions based on skin color, that's too uncomfortable. That requires them to examine themselves, their beliefs, the systems they benefit from." "So what's the point?" Shanice asked, her voice hollow. "If people are still going to make excuses, if officers are still going to profile us, if the system is still going to assume we're criminals just for existing, what's the point of any of it?" Destiny sat down beside her. "The point is those people on the street. The point is they found their courage. The point is next time, maybe they won't wait so long. Maybe they'll speak up immediately. And maybe they'll teach their children to speak up too. Maybe this horrible thing that happened to you, maybe it opens eyes. Maybe it changes minds." "That's a lot of maybes," Shanice said. "Yeah," Destiny agreed. "But maybes are what we've got. Maybes are how change starts." Marcus was scrolling through more messages. "Mrs. Rivera, Mr. Rivera's wife, she's organizing a community meeting about police accountability, about bias training, about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. She's already got like 200 people saying they'll come." Shanice closed her eyes. Her cheek throbbed, her wrists ached, her chest felt tight with all the fear and hurt and anger she'd swallowed down. But beneath all of that was something else, something fragile and tentative and maybe, just maybe like hope. I was invisible, she said quietly. Not when the officer grabbed me. I was hyper-visible then, visible in all the wrong ways. But before that, when people could have helped, when they could have spoken up, I was invisible. Just another black girl who they could convince themselves probably did something wrong. But then they saw you, her grandmother said, really saw you. And that's what we have to keep demanding, that people see us, not as stereotypes, not as threats, not as criminals by default, but as human beings, complex, flawed, beautiful human beings who deserve the same presumption of innocence, the same benefit of the doubt, the same basic dignity as anyone else. Shanice opened her eyes and looked at the faces around her, her grandmother, her brother, her best friend. She thought about Mr. Rivera and Mrs. Chen and Sarah Winters and all the others who had finally chosen to witness rather than watch. I want to talk to them, she said suddenly. The people who spoke up. I want to thank them, but I also want them to understand. It's not enough to speak up once. It's not enough to find your courage in a crisis and then go back to being comfortable. Then tell them that, her grandmother said. Tell them that at the community meeting. Tell them that in interviews, in posts, in every space where you have a voice. Tell them that being an ally isn't a moment, it's a lifetime. It's speaking up every time, not just when the injustice is so blatant it can't be ignored. Over the next days and weeks, Shanice did exactly that. She went to the community meeting and stood at the podium with her hands shaking and her voice trembling but clear. She told her story, not just what happened, but how it felt. The terror, the helplessness, the crushing weight of knowing that people were watching and doing nothing. Every second that I was on that ground, she said to the packed room, felt like an eternity. And during that eternity, I wondered if anyone would see me as worth saving. I wondered if my life, my dignity, my innocence mattered to anyone beyond my brother and my friend. She looked out at the crowd, at Mr. Morrison with his guilt-stricken face, at Mr. Rivera with his jaw set in determination, at Mrs. Chen wiping away tears, at Sarah Winters who'd brought her sister the lawyer, at dozens of others who had seen the videos and felt their own shame at how often they'd chosen comfort over courage. Thank you for speaking up, Shanice continued. But I need you to understand, speaking up once isn't enough. How many times before me has this happened when there wasn't a crowd, when the videos didn't go viral, when the person being hurt didn't have witnesses willing to finally say something? How many people are still invisible because it's easier to look away? The room was silent. I don't want to be special, Shanice said. I don't want to be the exception, the one case where people's conscience finally woke up. I want every black person, every person of color, every marginalized person to be seen as worth protecting from the very first moment. Not after minutes of violence, not after enough people gather to make silence uncomfortable. From the first moment. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. That's what justice looks like. Not going viral, not hashtags. Justice is a world where I can buy gum without fear. Where my skin doesn't mark me as suspicious. Where the people who are supposed to protect us see us as people worth protecting. Where bystanders don't exist because everyone understands that silence is participation in oppression. The applause started slowly, then built until it filled the room. But Shanice noticed the faces of those not clapping, the ones sitting with their arms crossed, the ones whispering to each other with skeptical expressions, the ones who still, even after everything, couldn't quite bring themselves to see the truth of what she was saying. Change, she realized, was going to be slow, painful, incomplete. But it was also possible. She'd seen it happen on Maple Street, one witness at a time. As she stepped down from the podium, Mr. Rivera was there. I meant what I said, he told her. Never again. I'll never be silent again. Hold yourself to that, Shanice said. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you something. He nodded solemnly. I will. I promise you. I will. And as Shanice left that community center, walking past the playground where children played without thinking about how the color of their skin might one day determine whether a stranger sees them as innocent or suspicious, She allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt since before that terrible afternoon. Not quite hope, but not quite despair either. Something in between. Something that acknowledged the pain and the injustice while refusing to surrender to it. Something that said, this world is broken, but maybe, just maybe, there are enough people willing to help fix it. One voice at a time. One witness at a time. One moment of courage at a time. The work of justice was never finished, but on Maple Street, for one 17-year-old girl with braids and pink beads and a receipt for gum in her pocket, it had finally begun.